Good evening, Sudhakar garu.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Very good evening to all of you, and a warm welcome to the Wise Views interactive webinar series. And this is the fourth in the series. Some of the best guest speakers we have been able to assemble all the while, and this is yet another interesting webinar that we have put together for you. And today we have with us Mr. Devendra Surana. He's a noted industrialist and a thought leader based out of Hyderabad. And we would like to present him today for you in this webinar, which is focused on evolving from the first-gen business and what are the lessons for entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. I would like to briefly explain the agenda for the day. We have the first 30 minutes of talk to be delivered by our guest, Mr. Devendra Surana, followed by a 15 to 20 minutes of interaction with Professor R. Prasad, which is based on the questions raised by all the participants beforehand at the time of registering for this webinar. And we have a cushion of additional 15 minutes where if we are not able to handle the time, we will be able to use that time to connect with the speaker, depending on his availability, and then resolve the queries that are raised by the audience. So this is roughly the plan that we have for today. It is my pleasure and a privilege once again to present Mr. Devendra Surana. He has a brilliant academic record. He studied from the prestigious Hyderabad Public School, Begumpet. After that, he has gone to Usman University College of Engineering and then graduated from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, for his postgrad. I must mention here that Mr. Devendra Surana is my co-alumnus at Usman University College of Engineering and also IIM Bangalore. And I would not miss this opportunity of mentioning this fact. That's the reason, and that's the advantage of introducing the guest. Mr. Devendra Surana has achieved several feats and made several accomplishments. He has been a noted member and chief of various industry associations in Hyderabad as well as in India. And briefly to mention that he was awarded the Entrepreneur of the Year in 2019, an award by Hyderabad Management Association presented by the Vice President of India. He's also running a charitable trust in Bolaram, charitable trust hospital in Bolaram for the last 3 decades. And currently he's the managing director of Bhagyanagar India Limited, also director on Surana Solar, manufacturers of copper products, auto electricals, and solar photovoltaic panels, and solar and wind power generation. Uh, with this introduction, I would now request Mr. Devendra Surana to start his talk, and I will stop sharing the screen from here.
Thank you, Sudhakar. As always, a pleasure to be in a gathering with you, especially since we share both our alma mater. As this is a topic on lessons learned in my life, please bear with me because I'll be talking a little bit about my own life, because without that, it becomes very difficult to share the lessons which I have got. So first of all, I must say that I was lucky. I am lucky. I am very, very lucky. I've got everything which I wanted without, literally without having to really fight for it or really work very hard for it, because of the family in which I was born. I was literally entitled. I went to a very good school, which gave me a great foundation to go ahead and achieve my higher education in both college and the institute where I went to. And I remember my early days, even before my asking, whether it was a cycle or clothes or anything, it was literally given to me before I really asked for it. So that's where, I was an entitled child, but that is the first lesson which I learned in my childhood from my parents and my grandparents. The difference, or the big difference for entrepreneurs or the children of entrepreneurs, the difference between entitlement and responsibility. So the lessons which I learned was, this is not my entitlement, this is my responsibility. A responsibility that I've got all this given to me on a platter, and I need to make use of this responsibility to ensure that it continues forward. And all the benefits which I got is not just for my own entitlement, but a responsibility to do good for the society, a responsibility to do good for my business, to ensure that my employees get better, and to ensure that this continues forward. I want to give an example. In front of my child, my son, I wanted to order a TV. And I just called somebody and said, look, I want this. And the next day, the TV was there in my house without having to really work for it. And my son then checked everywhere in the city. The price which I got, the service which I got was far better than what he could have ever achieved anywhere. And he said, this is fantastic. I said, this is what is the entitlement or the legacy which we have earned from our parents. He has done it because my parents have done good for the society. He has done it because I have a name. And he said, if I have an opportunity to serve you, I will be doing my best. So I wanted to teach my son that this is the responsibility which you get, that going forward further, you must get the same treatment and you must ensure that this treatment is carried forward. It is not the entitlement, but the responsibility which comes with the entitlement. I think the first lesson as an entrepreneur or a second-gen entrepreneur is to understand this difference between responsibility and entitlement, and ensure that it is the responsibility which we take forward and not the entitlement which we take forward. I've seen a lot of entitled kids who have spoiled their life because they feel that they are entitled to stuff and don't feel the responsibility to take the legacy forward. Then the second lesson, the harsh second lesson, is how do we celebrate failures? I joined my business in 1988, straight out of college after I did my MBA. I joined a thriving business and we did fantastic business. The motto, even then, back in the 90s for our group, was growth through innovation. We continued, growth continued year on year. But 10 years down the line, if I look back to my business, by the late 90s, not a single rupee of revenue, which I inherited in the year 1988, was still available to us. Now, the choice was very clear in front of us. We could always blame the government, the recession, the great devaluation which happened, and so many upheavals which happened in the 90s, and say, look, the government was bad and we couldn't do this and we couldn't do that. All our businesses got changed. But we had to keep moving forward. We closed our old businesses and started new businesses and ensured that the new businesses gave us more revenue, more income. Me and my brothers moved on to new age businesses, whether it was in those days fiber optic cables or telecom equipment or so many other issues which we went on. So the choice was very clear for us. Shall we be a victim and say that, look, everything is working against us and we are not in a position to move forward? Or do we be an entrepreneur and see an opportunity in every crisis which comes forward? There is a saying, the God opens one gate before he closes another. In today's world, in those days, and especially in today's world, for every one gate which is closed, 10 gates are being opened. The opportunities are multifarious. In every area which you look at, there is opportunity for growth, there is opportunity for doing better in life. But at the same time, the change is inevitable. Whatever businesses you are doing will face serious challenges every day, every month, and every year. We have to overcome these challenges and also move on to new businesses if we have to succeed in life. And this, I think, is a very critical lesson which I learned very early on in my business, and that is to celebrate failures. And this happens not only in a macro level when we change the entire businesses, but also in a micro level. If you come to my factory any day, there are at least 3 or 4 special projects which are ongoing every day. And these projects are on a continuous basis. Every 3 months, our target is to start something new or a new way of doing business or a new component or new something. And believe me, the fatality rate or the mortality rate of this projects is very high. Almost 50% of this new ventures which we look at fail. If we stop to dissect why did we fail and who is responsible and what happened, we'll never be able to move forward. We only take the failures in our stride and celebrate the 2, 3, 4 new ventures which come out every year and say that we need to do more like this. And this continued, you can say, literally for the last 30 years. And that's the reason, even though the old businesses are dying very, very fast, we continue to thrive in a new environment because it's a continuous process of renewal which we have at the factory. And believe me, I not only give my maximum time to this type of new ideas or new ventures and ensure that there is full encouragement to the entire team who takes up this type of projects. Also, it's a fact that I enjoy this part of my work the maximum. So if I spend the maximum time, it is on this project, the maximum reward I get in terms of my satisfaction, work satisfaction also comes when this type of projects succeed. So that is one thing which I think every entrepreneur, every intrapreneur needs to look at, is how do we do new things without delving on the failures which are bound to be on the way. For every one success, there will be 2 failures in any field which we look forward. So we need to keep moving on, keep celebrating this type of successes and move forward. So the second lesson which I'm very clear is celebrating failures. The third lesson, which is slightly off track. So while I am doing 2, 3, 4 projects on a daily basis, I'm very clear that multitasking is what most entrepreneurs keep doing. And they think that it is not only their birthright, but it is essential to multitask if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. One thing I've learned the hard way is multitasking is the enemy of productivity. While many projects can go on, but at one point we need to focus only at one project and ensure that there is full clarity and focus and coherence for the entire team, so that people flipping from one project to another, coming back to the first one and going back to the third one doesn't happen. And this is especially true as you go down to the shop floor levels. Multitasking at the lower levels is even big killer of productivity. If you get people to move from one project to another and back to another, it will definitely ensure that he's not going to perform in any of the projects given to him. So that is one thing which I wanted to do. I've seen all the people I know talking while working on a document, or looking at a TV while doing something else, talking on a phone, and then, similarly interacting with somebody else. I think this is one of the biggest failures which I realized maybe about 15 or 20 years into my journey as an entrepreneur. I attended a seminar on theory of constraints, and that's where we, actually did a project on how bad multitasking is, and it opened my eyes multifold. I was a video games freak. I played every game on the phone, whether it is the Snake or the Tetris or anything. And if there is one productivity killer, it is a game on a phone. I think that is one thing which all entrepreneurs, in fact, everybody should avoid. See, we need entertainment. We need to do things. We can play a video game on computer, which is not available to us all the time. But if you get addicted to a game on the phone, I've seen it really kills your initiative and productivity. Why I am saying this, there are a couple more points which I want to say when in multitasking. I have a saying: routine sets you free. It is counter intuitive that a routine will set you free. But believe me, it is very, very clear. I have set a routine that all my normal, dreary, boring jobs, which need to be done, which cannot be avoided, are set at a particular time of the day. So every day, 1 hour I set aside for doing all my routine jobs. So when the routine jobs comes and disturbs me at any other time, I say, no, that has to be done only in that window, so that I can keep my rest of the day free for creative works, innovative works, and do something which really matter for the business. So 1 hour a day, 1 day a week is what I keep for all my boring and dreary routine jobs, which must be done as an entrepreneur, because you cannot get away from that. That is part of life. The second thing which you might have heard, but I want to repeat it, is most of us are working for a business. Most of the time we are working for a business. We are ensuring that the business is successful. We ensure that the deliveries happen. We ensure that the sales get done, and so on and so forth. But the most productive thing is when you work on the business. That means, what do you want to do on your business in the future? How does your business look 2 years down the line or 5 years down the line? How much time can you spend working on the business rather than working for the business? Is a very important thing, especially for entrepreneurs at the top of the value chain, and also for intrapreneurs or leaders in the business. I have seen that, even though the top people can do it, the second level normally gets stuck in the dreary day-to-day job throughout the day. It should not happen. The second level leaders and the third level leaders also should work on the business to ensure that the efficiency and productivity in future goes up. And the last saying, which is counterintuitive, you'll see that I'll be saying a lot of counterintuitive things which have stuck in my mind, which really don't make a lot of sense. I have a saying: you're the most productive when you're doing nothing. As leaders of businesses, we need to set aside time when we are doing nothing, because great ideas, earth-shattering ideas, only happen when you're doing absolutely nothing. Nothing means no TV, no phone, and no work which is happening. Just the thoughts which come to you when you're doing nothing is what changes the business for the future. So this is another thought which I spend a lot of time doing nothing, and I feel that it is the most productive time for my business. The next learning, which I think everybody says, and which is much easier said than done, is delegation. Delegation, delegation, delegation. For an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur to be successful, it is not his one mind or his two hands which will make him successful. It is the team and the team below the team, which really builds a business. No one man, no small group of people can really make a business successful. So you need to learn the art of delegation to ensure that at every level in your organization, people are working as entrepreneurs. People are not working as just a pair of hands, but with a great set of mind to ensure that the business grows in which it is done. Like I said, it is much easier said than it is done. Especially moving from a first generation to a second generation, it becomes even more difficult. In the first generation entrepreneurs, everything is under the control, iron fist control of the owner, manager, entrepreneur. And it is very difficult for us to give up that control. It is very difficult to give up control, but believe me, it is impossible to grow without giving up the control. So this is the great thing which I learned much later in my life, that without delegation, we cannot grow beyond a particular point. And delegation does not mean delegation of, I have delegated and then still you feel that it's not get delegated. I've found that we should not interfere in the working of our business, even when we don't agree with what our team is doing. That is a test of a delegation. We should not interfere in our work, even when there are losses which are being caused by our team. Because the minute you start interfering in those activities, you'll find that all the decisions will be pushed up back to you. Once you correct your team and say, look, you have lost a little money, you could have done this better this way. Next minute, before taking a decision, he will call you and ask you, sir, shall we do it this way or that way? And this will keep going on until you are fed up with the whole idea, and your delegation will still just be on paper. So the test is, how can you keep aside without interfering, even when things are not going fully according to your thinking or what could be possible or what is up to you. The second part of delegation, which is very, very important, listen to your team. Listen very, very carefully. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs miss out. Because when you listen, it is not just listening, but you have to listen, accept whatever they are saying with a lot of time given to it. So listening is a very important part of delegation, which a lot of us miss out. And I missed out in the earlier part of my career. The second is, when you are asked to give a decision, do not procrastinate. When somebody in your team asks you to give a decision, you need to give that decision immediately, along with the reasoning why you're giving that decision. So while delegation is important for them to take their own decisions, but if they ask you to take a decision sometime, you take a decision, give them the rationale behind the decision, and encourage them to take that same decision next time on the same basis. So that is something which I found very important in terms of growth as an entrepreneur. I'll just briefly tell you what I learned from two very great people in delegation. Though I don't fully subscribe to Warren Buffett's theory and I'm not really his fan, but one thing which stuck to my mind, he says he has only 3 things on his to-do list. Everybody has a to-do list, and he has only 3 things on his to-do list. And this is not a to-do list of the day, but it is probably a to-do list of a week or a month. So he has only 3 things which he needs to do. The rest of the stuff is delegated to everybody else. So that's how you need to do. You should have a very small to-do list, whether it's an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. Even the intrapreneur within the group, the next level, the CEO or the president or the vice president or the GM, needs to reduce his to-do list and ensure that he delegates it further. So this is a very important thing on the delegation front. The other thing which I've learned from another person, again, I don't subscribe to his philosophy or policies, but the learning from wherever it comes is really good. So he said, when somebody asked him, how do you delegate things? And his very simple answer was, with the power of ignorance. He says, the easiest way to delegate things is that be ignorant of stuff. Don't ask people to report to you hundreds of data. You just be ignorant of most of the operations which are happening. obviously the entire thing will be delegated, because your team knows that the boss doesn't know the entire detail behind it. They will not come back to you again and again for any decision. So that is the power of ignorance. If you can reach that level of delegation, that is true level of delegation. He adds another point when he says the power of ignorance. What he calls the power of diplomacy. So what he has is, he has 2 or 3 critical things which he needs to work on, whether it is managing the environment or managing a particular new project. So 2 or 3 things he will use Sam, Dam, Dan, Bhed. He will do whatever in his power to ensure that 2 or 3 things are done. Because you are ignorant of 95% of the activities, you can concentrate on 5% of your activities with 100% focus. And that is what is required for an entrepreneur. To ensure the success of a business, the entrepreneur must concentrate on things which are of real value. The biggest constraint in an organization, most people will say it's either funds or manpower or talent or materials or machinery. The biggest constraint for a growth of an organization is the bandwidth of the person at the top, and you need to conserve it for a very few critical items which are going to be earth changing. So that is the power of delegation, which I found very important as we continue on our journey of growth and diversification. The last lesson before we open for interaction for me in this journey has been create value. As an organization, as a person, create value for everybody around you. Create value through business, create value through innovation, not through appropriation. There are 2 ways of creating value. You can take part of the value created by somebody else and get it for yourself, what I would call rent seeking. But you can create value by changing the form, by doing whatever businesses. In my copper business, we have a policy that we create value for our customers through QCDS, that is quality, cost, delivery, and service. These are the 4 ways in which we create value to our customers in every which way. So the focus should be singular, create value. Part of the value will come back to you no matter what. If you create value, value will come back to you. So I always give a case study that suppose there is a chance you can increase value of 200 rupees for your customers. You will have to spend 100 rupees. The customer is not willing to pay for it. You would expect him to pay 100, 125, 150 rupees for a value of 200 which you create. But for various reasons, the customer might not be able to pay for it. He might be saying that I will give you 50 rupees or 75 rupees or nothing at all. So the question comes, do you still go ahead and create that value to your customer? And in my journey of 30 years, especially when you have long-term customers, creating that value of 200 rupees extra, even at your own cost, pays back multifold in the future. And this is something which, is so counterintuitive. If the customer is not paying, why will you spend the money? And that is some learning which I've found that even in small businesses, B2B businesses, B2G businesses, even B2G businesses where the government sometimes just cannot pay you, it makes sense to do it because the value will come back to you sometime or later. One of the biggest examples of this is Google Earth. I don't know if all of us use Google Earth, Google Maps. It creates $3 billion value for its customers, and virtually nothing goes back to Google. But it has created such a huge value for the customers, and we see Google is thriving and growing. It still might not be getting money out of Google Maps as much as it spends, but that is what is required in the world. If you can create value for your customers, the value will come back to you in some way or the other, sometime or the other. So that is one thing which we need to look at. And when we talk about creating value, it is not only creating value for your customers, it is creating value for all your stakeholders, whether it is your shareholder, whether it is to your employee, whether it is to your community, which is a very important part of creating value. In any community which you are, whether it's a business community or the locality where the factory works, or your small community in terms of your class or your religion, creating value everywhere will pay off in a big way, not only to you as an individual, but also to the business as a business. With the corporate social responsibility, which people talk about, if we can use it properly, it creates value. And I think that's a very important part of life lesson which I have heard. And to end the talk, I will end with my favorite saying, which Sudhakar and a few people must have heard, being sick of hearing, is make your customer lazy. That is the ultimate way of creating value to your customer. We have to move beyond customer satisfaction, customer delight, to making your customer lazy, to ensure that the customer gets what he wants before he needs it, to ensure that he doesn't have to work to get any of your product or service. Thank you very much. I think we are through with 30 minutes, so I'll open it for discussion.
Great, sir. Thank you very much. What a set of lessons. Almost all of them are counterintuitive if we look at it from a normal vanilla 2D kind of view that we have for the workplace or for the work itself. Amazing, sir. I'm sure we have lots of questions to unravel those many more learnings that are there with you as an entrepreneur. And before I move on to the next one, let me mention that I'm proud of mentioning this again and again. Mr. Devendra Surana was awarded the brain of the batch at IIM Bangalore. And there must be a reason why subsequently that award is not given to anyone. So I have gone to IIM Bangalore after several years after Mr. Devendra Surana passed out, but you know the reason is obvious, and you will discover that in the subsequent responses he would have for the questions that are prepared. Now, I take the privilege of introducing the moderator, Professor R. Prasad.
Good evening, Professor.
Yeah, Professor R. Prasad is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIM Calcutta. He is currently the director for the academic wing of ICFI Group, and he has actually architected the online MBA program, which is the latest product from the portals of ICFI University Group. And he's also the professor and mentor for this online MBA program, and he is the moderator for the session today. Over to you, Professor R. Prasad.
You're still muted, Professor.
Yeah, please unmute. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhakar, and thank you, Professor Surana. I'll indeed call you that because you bring in the framework of insights along with the practice that you carry with you, and which is very much needed in the world of business and management. In fact, I wish we had more people who would be able to bring in far more practice than what is happening today. So thank you. And I must say that the way in which you have culled out from your experience and given us very practical insights is something that a lot of people in industry and also a lot of people who come in from work and then get into academics look for very eagerly. There are a lot of frameworks which are available out there, but I think the moment it comes from somebody who's got a background and practice, it's far more inspirational. So, and I think the volume of comments that we see in the chat box is a tribute to that. Thank you indeed. So what we have tried to do is we've got, about 70 to 80 questions when we did the registration. So we've kind of aggregated it. And for your benefit, I've tried to put it into some sort of sections which we thought were important. And to keep the session interesting, the sections will be alternated between me and Mr. Sudhakar. So I'll start off with the section which I've aggregated on the mindset. The mindset is something that the entrepreneur brings in to how he or she does the work. When we listen to you, we are able to understand certain things which comes from a certain mindset. So in this mindset section, there are a few questions. So I'll start with the first one. I've culled out from some surveys, and here particularly I've taken from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. And here is the first one. In India, we have about 56% of adults who've started a business due to the pandemic, and about 60% who stopped a business due to the same pandemic. And both these percentage figures, when taken with that of about 43 to 46 other countries globally, are much higher. So both of them speak different. So the question here is, how do you see the Indian mindset to be different when it comes to this decision to start and the decision to stop, and what perhaps could be the factors driving this?
So without being very jingoist about it, I think the Indian mind, we are much more sharper in intellect, and that goes for both good and bad, because we are very entrepreneurial, we are very jugaad types, but we find it very difficult to follow systems. And that is the same thing, reason why people are very quick to start a new business. They can understand a business model much faster than anybody across the world. I think other than maybe Chinese people. I've seen Indian and Chinese people are really very intelligent when you want to look at a business model and how we can get something out of it. Like I mentioned, it's not just the pandemic. The age we are in, the changes are going to be faster and faster. The opportunities which are there are going to be huge, but at the same time, existing opportunities, the window is short, and you might find that the window for that opportunity closes very fast. So for example, with if you look at the way things are happening, the customer is getting directly e-commerce and stuff like that. The entire distribution chain, the entire wholesale region, the entire retail trade will all get into a toss. So in every area which you start looking at it, you will find that people are getting totally disturbed in the way work is happening. But that also means there are equal opportunities. So you'll see more and more cases where people get out of business, and more places where people get into business and get a spectacular success out of business. So my advice, like I said in my own presentation, we have got out of so many businesses over the last 20-30 years, but we have started more businesses at the same time. So you need to continuously keep doing that.
Thank you, Professor. I think that's a very very encouraging way of looking at the situation, and indeed for the kind of people that we have in our country, it quite correlates. So here we have the second question, and I've just given some background to it. There are quite a number of questions which come up in this. We have about 83% plus Indians who feel there are very good opportunities to start a business. This is findings in 2020 in the area they live in. And about 82% who feel that they have the capabilities, which includes knowledge, skill, and experience, to start a business. And these supposedly rank amongst the highest in the world amongst the same 43 to 46 companies. Now, the other side of the story is that there are about 57% of Indians who will not start a business for fear that it might fail, the fear of failure. And this is the highest globally. Coupled with this, the early stage entrepreneurial activity and established business ownership is also one of the lowest in India at about 11%. The intent to start a business in 3 years, of course, these are from surveys, so we have to take it with that kind of a filter. The intent to start a business in 3 years is only 20%, and this is also below the global average. While the entrepreneurial frameworks which are existing, the government, the finance, the social, cultural, educational, etc., as rated by experts, is supposed to be above average and near good. So we've got about 3 factors which are positive, which are opportunities, capabilities, and the entrepreneurial framework conditions. And we have got two things which are, lower than the global average. One is the fear of failure, and the other is the early stage entrepreneurial activity and established business ownership. So, how do we read this? How do we improve on this, Professor?
So the fact is there, entrepreneurship, especially the early stage startups, have a very high level of mortality. You cannot expect everybody who starts a new business with a new idea to really succeed. Again, I have a very favorite quote for this. A startup has to be a impossible combination of two things, a poet and a banya. A poet to dream up something which is different, and a banya to take the last penny out of the business. Now, these two combinations are very, very difficult in a startup. And we will continue to see mortality rates for startups happening. The reason why we have a failure of success in India, which is higher than the rest of the world, is we don't have a adequate safety net for the people who fail. And the concept of celebrating failures, like I mentioned in my topic, is not there. A failure in Indian society, especially in your own community, in your own family, will be such a big stigma on you that you don't want to take that chance. You know, your wife, your mother, everybody will look down upon you. There is no celebration of failures in India. The other reason why we are not so successful in startups is, I keep saying that, the safety net of a job, which a lot of people look for in India over the last 20, 30 years, unfortunately, it has been put in our brain that a safe, secure job in the government sector is probably what we should be aiming for. Things are changing fast, especially with the examples which are coming of successful people who have started the businesses. But these are practical problems which are here to stay. We need to change the mindset. It is not going to happen in a day or two. And believe me, for every one success, there have to be 3 failures. I'm talking of my own example in my factory on a daily basis. But it's how you take it and how you move forward.
Thank you, Prof. I especially like the concept of, the celebrating failures and the fact that in our society, indeed, it is seen all around us that, right from when one is young, that if something goes wrong in school, in the marks, and then you have the parents after it starts there and then it goes on. And I think that's a very vital cultural aspect, and we need to see how we can improve on that. The next question, Professor, is about, there are two contrasting situations. These have come up from the questions themselves. And this is connected to that, the safety net that you're talking about. How do you take a risk if you have a settled job? This is one part of the story. And the second part of the story is that because they did not get a job after their studies, they started a business. Now, what is your advice when you combine these situations?
First of all, calling me professor is putting me off this thing, because I'm not a professor. But yes, on that safety net of a job, which deters people from taking the entrepreneurial plunge, is very, very difficult. But you have to understand, an entrepreneur needs to continuously pivot. Taking it as a last resort because you don't get a job is not such a bad idea, because to succeed in there is a saying, it's darkest before the dawn. So in every entrepreneurial opportunity, if you talk to any of the big people, just before they became spectacularly success, they were looking at failure down the road. It's only when people become passionate because of desperation that you will see that success happen. So you need that drive in people. I wouldn't look at a person who's happy in a safe job. I wouldn't push him to get into a entrepreneurial venture unless he has the passion for it. Because success in business doesn't come easy. It requires sleepless nights. I have 2 things which I can talk from my own experience. Today, I work literally 2 to 3 hours a day, literally. But believe me, my mind is working 24 hours on the business. So that mindset of working 24 hours continuously thinking how you can improve the business, what you can tweak so that the whole business can change, is very much required for a successful entrepreneur. Physically working in the business doesn't really give you the full success. So that is something which we need to understand. And sometimes a success in an entrepreneurial organization will happen only with the back to the wall. There is one question which came, which I find a lot of people keep asking me. We delegate our work to our senior employees and we train them and we ensure that they come to a good level, they keep working. And then they take not only the job, but also the knowledge outside. And what do we do to such a situation? We are afraid of giving our, IP delegation, because then there is a vacuum in the organization. Similar question, how do you trust somebody? Because anybody can dupe you. I'm saying both have full risk, but you cannot work without that. You have to ensure that your people stay with you for a longer time, and whatever knowledge they get out of delegation gets institutionalized into the organization. So work is delegated, but you can also build systems around it so that the organization learns from it, not only the next in line whom you have delegated work and whom you have empowered. The learning of that person should also get institutionalized, so that you have to ensure that the delegation goes to the next level also. So if this person goes, the next person comes up with similar knowledge and comes up to that same level. You cannot come to a situation that we don't lose people. Yes, we can try to ensure that we keep our people. In my organization, I have a good track record of retaining people for a very, very long time. And it comes not only from monetary rewards, but from other aspects as well. But this is a risk we need to take if we need to grow. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs do not delegate because they're afraid this person will learn. Not only will he go away, but he'll also take my business secrets away. That's the clearest way of bringing down your organization, and within 5 to 7 years, getting into that victim mentality and closing down the business. We need to avoid that mentality at first. I saw that question in the chat box, so I thought I'll just reply to that.
Thank you, sir. I acknowledge your discomfort on the professor designation. Thank you. Thank you. What we do now is I'll hand it over to Mr. Sudhakar, and he has a section that he will ask.
Thank you very much. I'll now focus on a different bucket of questions which are aggregated from the responses of the members who have joined, and they were quite eagerly wanting to know about these things. Sir, we have often heard that people saying that business is in my blood. So the question is, are entrepreneurs born, or is it a skill that can be learned? So what are the qualities and what are the skills that one has to learn if it can be learned?
So the answer is both yes and no. You are born as well as you can be taught. There are a few inherent things like risk-taking abilities, the ability of going beyond your comfort zone and doing business, which are very much required for entrepreneurship. But I will not refute the fact that entrepreneurship is in my blood is a true saying. So talking from my own experience, right from the age when I was probably about 10 or 12, it used to be my job to connect calls for my dad and give it to him with business people. And then I used to hear how he used to talk to business people, how he used to discuss what's happening in the factory. And that definitely gives people from business families an edge, because business is there not really in the blood, but it is there on the dining table, it is there on the play area, it is there everywhere. Around you, you can see the business happening, and it gives you a much better aptitude for business in future. So definitely there is a positivity there. But given a few basic things, I think entrepreneurship can also be learned very well and much later in life. Proper training in terms of especially the risk taking, being outside the comfort zone. A lot of people, unless all the boxes are ticked, they cannot move. So entrepreneurs need to move without having the entire data in their head. That is one thing which happens in most of the cases on a day-to-day basis. So some of these things you can learn as you move forward. And like I said, the biggest teacher is back to the wall. A back to the wall situation teaches much more of entrepreneurship than any MBA or any entrepreneurship course can teach you in life.
Great, sir. Thank you very much. I think that gives a great deal of clarity for those who are wanting to start up. Now, startup is a big buzz, not just in India but around the world. And in India, it's much more these days. Compared to the days in the past, when we start up now, we are definitely looking for partners, either in terms of capital, in terms of passion, in terms of acumen, in terms of talent in itself. Now, how do we find trustworthy partners, sir? You have any clues or any hints for us?
So you're talking from a venture capitalist perspective or the entrepreneur's perspective?
Entrepreneur's perspective.
So from an entrepreneur's perspective, when you go and seek venture capital, you wouldn't have too much choice about it, but be very careful as to what are the terms which you are signing on. And I've seen most of the people in the initial stages when you interact, you will get to know what is it the venture capitalist is expecting from us. So look at people who are interested in growth. Look at people who are looking at a slightly longer term than an exit. And if somebody is just looking at a 3x exit in 3 years, probably that is not the right approach for you to look at. But people who are looking at growth, people who are looking at mentoring you, I think the best way of startup funding is look at partners who are willing to mentor you, who are willing to make connections for you. As a startup, you will have a lot of problems, maybe whether it is in taxation, whether it is connecting with the right resource for sourcing, for rights resource for sales. So any venture capital or a person who's investing in you, if he is also investing time in giving you this mentoring helps, I think that is what you should look at. That will help you get a better partner for the future. Money, even if he gives you a little less, is okay as long as he's mentoring you.
Great. Thank you, sir. The other side of the question, or the other side of the answer that you have given, lies in the aspect of funding in itself. Is it easier to get the bank loans or to raise funds from, say, venture capital? And given the fact that RBI has cut the interest rates, is it helping? If it is, to what extent it is helping for the startups to raise funds?
Startups, you will not be able to access bank funds easily, because banks will look at so many, in spite of all the CGT, MSE, that is without collateral guarantee scheme and all those, initial stages, you will have to go to either friends, families is the first stage. Second is venture capitalists, and banks will come only much later when you are looking at scaling up. After the business model is evolved and you're looking at scaling up, that is when bank loan will come into being. So there is a saying, a bank loan is good for people who have a very steady cash flow. And equity is good for people who have uncertain cash flow. In a startup situation, the cash flows are always uncertain. Always keep looking at equity until you're quite certain of your cash flows down the line. So bank loan will probably come 3 to 5 years after the startup.
Great, sir.
Yes,
thank you very much for this.
Bank interests have come down. So for people like me, bank interests are better right now. So it's always easy.
Great. Thank you, sir. One more question in the bucket of startups, or the concerns for the startups I would like to raise here, sir, is that now we are all experiencing pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty going around. Now, what is your advice to those startups, or what kind of ventures, what kind of opportunities that they should look for? Because there are risks of all kinds. The risks are much more than the normal time. Non-pandemic is different from pandemic. What opportunities they should pursue, and how do they minimize their failure rate? I mean, already the failure is very, very high in startups. And in such ventures, as you mentioned in your talk, for every success, there are more than 2 failures. Now, how do they manage the risk? How do they minimize the risk? And what are the survive and sustain strategies that you advise them? And if they already have launched the venture, how do they survive and sustain? This is the set of questions that we have for you, sir.
Tough question, Sudhakar. Pandemic is definitely a very tough time for startups, because startups thrive in continuous idea exchange, meeting people, getting things out there. Today, when people are not out there, it is really tough. So, not saying that for some startups it's still a good time, but right now, is my personal take is, for the next 6 months or 1 year, things are going to be quite tough for the startup environment, because you have to understand one thing: startups thrive on ideas, and ideas come when there is an exchange of thought, when people meet up. So why do we have incubation hubs? Because 50 people with a lot of energy sit together, and we don't realize how the idea exchange happens there. All of us are thinking of different ideas, but so many of the basic concepts are same. And that is why it is very important to have this, startup hubs, and where people of startups meet, they interact, maybe just have a meal or a drink together. That is where the ideas happen. And today, unfortunately, until this pandemic is over, hopefully it will be over in 6 months to 9 months, it is a tough scene. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat that by saying it is not. Um, Depending on each individual startup, there might be some startups which are still good for pandemic, things which now, for example, e-commerce, delivery, and all those things, areas are really picking up. So areas which help in those type of services will definitely be a good thing for startups, where social distancing is the norm, where people cannot move around. So if you see the Dunzos and the Rapidos, they are making great strides now. So those are easy names which I have taken. But if your business or your service model is more towards helping people stay away from the crowd, it will be more successful. But if you are dependent on more crowdsourcing or getting people to meet people, it is tough time. No sugarcoating that.
Thank you, sir. That's a great deal of direction for all of us. I will now pause for a while here, and I'll hand over to Professor R. Prasad for the next bucket of questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhakar. I hope the audio is on. Yes, it is. This section is related to entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And just for the benefit of the audience, the entrepreneurial employee or the intrapreneur is someone who develops business activities as part of their job. So this could involve activities such as creating and launching new products, services, or a process, or it could mean establishing a new business entity. Now, this again, if you look at India compared to the rest of the world, the level of entrepreneurial employee activity in India is pretty low. It's at about 0.3%, which is one of the lowest amongst all the economies, 43, 48, 46 economies surveyed. So what do you do to increase this figure? I mean, how do you increase such a figure in this world of change?
So
this is
the
the
entrepreneurial employee is actually more important than the entrepreneur himself. And for any entrepreneur to be successful, he must have not one, but a set of entrepreneurial employees. And believe me, I have seen across businesses, small and big, every business has entrepreneurial employees. The problem is it gets stuck at number 1, 2, or 3, and that too at the top level. At lower down the level, we don't find entrepreneurial employees. The people just below the entrepreneur are typically on intrapreneurial. In India, if you look at the MSME and stuff like that, the chief person under the hand is entrepreneurial, but he becomes a control freak in future. That is where I think we have to move beyond the first level of entrepreneurs to a second level of entrepreneurs, which I don't see happening in many organizations in India. I agree to that part of it. So how do we do it? My presentation, if you look at the delegation and looking at success, celebrating failures, is all about that. Only if you can delegate without asking questions, you will create entrepreneurs. The minute you start asking questions, why did this go wrong? You will stifle that entrepreneurship, which is inherently available in the Indian mindset. Let me be very, very clear. The Indian mindset, the Jugadu mindset of Indians has full entrepreneurship fully packed into it. It is being killed by the way we control our people. And I've seen it many times across industries. The first level of employees become entrepreneurs, but they kill it in the second and third level. So that is where we need to institutionalize that habit of celebrating failures, of not commenting on mistakes. Even a simple comment that this was a mistake means next time before he takes an action, he'll come back to you and ask whether I should do this or that. And that's the end of entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship need not be just, doing a new product, but it is also a new way of delivering the service, a new way of, getting things done at the lower level. So that is also entrepreneurship. It need not be just a new product or in a macro sense, becoming an entrepreneur. Even in smaller ways, they can become entrepreneurs, whether it is a maintenance team. And I've seen, the entrepreneurship happening maximum in the maintenance teams in India. They are really good at jugaad work. The maintenance teams are the teams which really, work on the site and get things done. We need to just encourage it. That's it.
Thank you, sir. I think, the point about a lot of people being control freaks and the point of delegating and then celebrating failure is the big takeaway there. The next query is basically arises about if you want to build organizations which adopt a growth and innovation mindset. How do you instill this mindset in executives? In a manner of speaking, you have already addressed it in the previous question, but then would you like to add to it, sir?
See, you have to make it a way of life. Right from top to the bottom, we need to keep looking at it. And if I've realized one thing, what the top team focuses on gets done. So if the top team is focusing on innovation, on growth, what is happening, instead of looking at being a bean counter or what is your costing, where have you spent money, what is the expenditure level at various activities. It depends on where you are putting the focus on. And that is, we are blessed. We are blessed with an economy which is growing at one of the biggest rates. We are blessed with a human resources which is far beyond anywhere else in the world and at a reasonable cost. So we are blessed. We need to take this opportunity and put it to both growth as well as innovation.
Thank you. Thank you. I think making innovation a way of life.
Yes.
And practicing it daily, and the leaders doing so so that the others also learn from that behavior and continue with it.
So
yes.
I mentioned jugaad, and somebody is asking me, Manisha is asking me a question whether jugaad is good for the Indian entrepreneurship or otherwise. So, like I said, jugaad is good, but if jugaad comes in the way of creating systems, which it does in India, we have to make a difference between jugaad and breaking systems. So if it is breaking systems, it's definitely not good. And people confuse the two. People think jugaad automatically means breaking systems. In a way, it is short-circuiting systems, but that is where you have to make the difference. You have to take the jugaad and ensure that it is systemized in the whole system. The thought process with jugaad comes in the mind of people as jugaad means no system. And to a certain extent, right, but we need to institutionalize the whole system to ensure that suppose a jugaad works, ensure that it becomes systemized. Not that, Typical way of jugaad. There is no plug on the wire and the person takes 2 wires and puts it in the socket. That is jugaad. But if you are institutionalizing that jugaad, it is the most dangerous thing. So that is not the jugaad which I'm talking about. You know, sometimes people confuse, but jugaad, suppose you are making a new way of doing things with much less resources. That is my definition of jugaad. Getting things done with less resources, not with a shortcut of systems. That is what is jugaad, which can lead to innovation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you also for answering the related query which has come up in the chat box. Here, you know, I can't help but recollect our late founder, Shri N.J. Yashasvi. So I remember a small episode, you know, when I was joining, I joined up after about 10 years of being an entrepreneur. And then he asked me, one of the questions I remember very clearly, which he asked me is, do you think you'll be able to adapt to systems?
Yes.
So I think, you know, it very well connected to what you're saying. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. By the way, I have interacted with Mr. Yashasvi way back. I mean, probably in the first year of my working, and did learn from him. Thank you.
Thank you. Then there's a direct question from one of our very esteemed colleagues, and that is, you know, how do executives learn from entrepreneurs?
How do executives learn from entrepreneurs? This is within the same organization. There is, of course, the leadership impact happens. So what the leader of the organization typically moves down the line. But, you know, entrepreneurship can teach people across geographies, across histories. And that is the reason executives, entrepreneurs should read or see small videos of successful businessmen and entrepreneurs. Whether it's Steve Jobs, I've quoted a couple, Vedanta, Anil Agarwal, and Warren Buffett. You might not agree to whatever they say, but you will always find nuggets of information which are suitable to you, which will improve your whole learning. See, when you are learning from entrepreneurship, I don't want you to do hero worship. Use your own mind to say that, yes, I mean, look at that brilliance of Anil Agarwal, power of ignorance. He's running such a big business and he says, I want to be ignorant of what is happening in my business 95% of the time, so that I can concentrate my 5% on things which really matter. So content, so you can learn from that type of things when you see their short videos. Reading might be a good option, and it's not in fashion nowadays, but I would always recommend reading. But small videos, TED Talks, you can learn from a lot of these things when you see their interviews on TV. Follow big business people whenever they talk on TV or anywhere. And you might get a small nugget of information. And believe me, one small nugget of information is enough to change an entrepreneur's life. It might not be enough to change an executive's life, but for an entrepreneur, one small nugget of information in totally unrelated area will change the entire mindset.
Thank you. That's a very practical tip. You know, seeing small videos, interviews, and trying to take away using our own mental framework. Thank you, sir, for that. I think, you know, the next section is about family business, and I'd hand it to Mr. Sudhakar to do the honors.
Yeah, I was, my mind was actually meandering around the jugaad thing, because jugaad evokes lots of questions. But then Professor Prasad has asked me to look at family business. Sir, one question I have, which is actually reflecting the aspirations of many members who have joined today, is that supposing I have a family business, like the way you have family business before you ventured out to study your post-graduation in management, you already had an established family business. Supposing I have a family business, why should I join my family business? Are there any advantages to start with, in the sense that it is a tip that you're giving somebody who already has a family business? Why should I join? And the second question is, how do I scale up, or how do I evolve from there, from the first gen business? What are the tips? What are the lessons, or what are the important things that I have to keep in mind when I scale up from my first gen business? This is the set of questions for you, sir. Thank you.
It's a whole chapter, the answer of joining a family business. But I have a strong feeling on that. I've seen a lot of my friends and relatives who don't want their kids to join their family business. They feel that the business is not worth joining. And to them, I want to give this message that you're mistaken. The grass is always greener on the other side. Joining a family business for the new generation person is most likely okay. In most cases, okay, let me put it this way. In some cases, it might not be okay, but in most cases, it should be good. The first generation entrepreneur feels that I've gone through this rigmarole. I have managed the tax people, I have managed the customer, I've managed the, suppliers, I've managed the finances. It's too much of tedium for my children. I think they always feel that the grass is greener on the other side. Even when they do a job, it's going to be equally difficult. Joining a family business is a big advantage for people. It was a big advantage for me. First, let me give my example. It gave me a great platform to start off from instead of starting off from scratch. So if you look at a successful family business graduating, the chances will become 50% higher than a startup succeeding or failing. So as a startup or a family business growth, will be more likely to be successful. So I would personally feel that joining a family business is great. New ideas bring new generation brings new ideas. So when somebody joins a new business, it brings in new ideas. It brings in clash of the generations. And this I've seen in many places. The only way to solve this is having a proper respect for each other. Typically, I've seen many places where the son is afraid of the father. He thinks the father is old dated, but he cannot do anything. The old man thinks he doesn't have the experience, he doesn't know anything. So if you have that mindset of family business is much more difficult to succeed than a mindset where each of them understand the benefit of the other. The youngster has to understand the experience and the hardship which the old man has gone through, and which brings in a lot of value to the business. And the old man also has to understand that things are changing and changing very rapidly, and without new ideas and new ways of doing business, the business cannot thrive and grow. So the main thing about joining family business is to work on this understanding between the generations and a good amount of respect and interaction. This is very difficult, far easier said than done. I mean, I know I'm sitting here and saying it, it's so easy for me, but this is the area which needs to be worked on. But I still sincerely believe that 90% of the family businesses are worth joining, worth scaling up, and worth flipping. So, when I say you join the family business, it doesn't mean that you go and join the family business and sit on the same chair and do the same thing which your father did. You can always look at new ways of doing it. I mean, I'm just giving an example, very cliche example of taking a business online. I'm just giving this so that it is a very cliched example, but there's so many new ways of doing things. Once you are in the business, you'll realize that there is technology can be used, the way the world has evolved can change the way the business can be done. And the way you can search the entire environment. I've seen the elder generation is so afraid of the computer, but a young generation will find the information in a jiffy. So those are the things which we need to build upon.
Fantastic, sir. I'm going to ask you one personal question before I hand it over to Mr.
I'll just answer one question which is in the corollary question on the family business. What if the family business have brought the product to maturity stage and the next generation takes up the business at that stage? So I think this is the example which I started. I came into a thriving business which was growing very fast. 10 years, there was no business left. So you have to keep growing on the business, getting into new parts of the business. It's not that, I just totally went out of the same business environment, but the products and the services which we are doing were gone. So I entered in that business phase itself, in my own business. We need to keep evolving along with the market. see what else can be done. So it's the simple thing which in management classes which you talk about, horizontal integration, whether you can service the same customers in a better way. Can you do something to your raw material? Can you do something with your finished product and get into a value added product? Or can you use the same technology and do something else? So with the same business in the majority stage, you can look at these 4 areas where you can take the expertise of the business and move somewhere else. So in our cases, we took the same customer, we took some technology and moved on. We took some raw material advantage and moved on, but the business went off. So every business has some advantage which takes you into the next phase of another business. I hope that answers Srija.
Yes, sir. I think that's a brilliant answer. And on one hand, it has kicked away my own question, but let me dig deeper. I was planning to ask you something about yourself, sir.
Sorry?
I was planning to ask you something about your own family business. The question is, what did your father or grandfather or your family do to make sure that you come back to your family business? Is there any set of things that they did for you? The other side of the question is also, I know about your son. Do you think he's going to join your family business? And what are the set of things that you are doing to attract him back into your business?
So as far as myself, I don't know whether, see, we are talking about late 80s when a job was less attractive than it is today. So those days, a job was not really an option for somebody who had a family business. Today, the set of parameters are totally different. And what did my father, grandfather, they exposed me to the business right from early on, took me to the factories, offices, whenever time permitted based on holidays or, just whatever is there. As far as my son is concerned, I was very clear right from the beginning that he's free to pursue whatever he wants, but a little nudging, like, making him do an internship in the factory, let him go to the factory and interact with some people, creates an interest and awareness, and also gives him an opportunity to understand that he can create value in that business. So my son did a project as internship in his 11th class. That project became a success in his school, and it got him an admission in his college. And so automatically he is inclined to see, yes, I can also create value in the business. It's not just that, like I gave that example of entitlement and responsibility. I don't want him to feel that he's entitled to inherit the business, but if he has the responsibility to grow the business, then that is what should bring him to the business. Whether he can ensure that he can do something more to the business. So that's what I've done, and hopefully it's there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Hope so. Thank you, sir. Over to Professor Prasad for the next dimension of questions.
Thank you, sir. You have excited us with this concept of the adjacencies in the existing business and the value chain where a lot of things can be done. And I think that is a very, very practical suggestion, and both for entrepreneurs as well as perhaps people from family businesses. Now, I come to the section on education and learning. And I think, you have yourself gone to IIM Bangalore, done a program in management, and a lot of MBAs, a lot of engineering colleges. And there is a question also about whether we should start something from schools, when we should start, what we should do. So I'll just, give the context, integrate all the questions because we are at about 7:48 and we have already overshot our time. So first thing is, what should MBA programs do to develop entrepreneurial skills? And the other thing is, can we start much earlier, whether it is in school or, degree, etc. And how do we encourage more people to do services related kind of entrepreneurship, because there's so many MBA colleges and engineering colleges. And what do you do to inspire all these students? This is the set of questions that comes under learning and education.
A lot of questions. Let me try and answer some of them. First of all, let me be very clear. And I think other than a very few, less than 10% of the people who go to colleges will agree with me that what you learn in the college, you forget immediately. The only thing which remains with you is how to learn to learn. And that is a lifelong journey. If you are confident of learning new things, or if you are confident of not afraid of learning new things, I think the job of education is done. Very few people, whether it's engineers or managers, actually use the theory taught in class in the practice in business. So there is a saying, I have learned engineering for 4 years, and after doing my engineering, the only thing I engineer is engineer people, that is manage people. So that is what is a practical situation of learning. What can you do as a MBA college to encourage entrepreneurship? So I think entrepreneurship can be inspired more than educated. So while you can teach the thoughts of entrepreneurships or the tenets of entrepreneurship, what makes a successful entrepreneur, passion, energy, risk taking. But I think what is going to most likely connect is exposing your students to entrepreneurs. How you can expose students to entrepreneurs is a question which comes. One practical, one way in most of the people do is go and do some projects in the society, ensure that you use your pull as a institute, make them interact with a couple of entrepreneurs here and there. That is one way of doing it. Getting entrepreneurs to your college is okay, but these are still have limitations and bounds. What would be a very good way of teaching entrepreneurship is taking case studies of entrepreneurs who are successful and teaching in class. So you take a study of, say, Anil Agarwal. What did he do in life? And a professor teaches him, and the students sort of research what are the things which we have done, and you discuss what he has done in class. You know, what has Steve Jobs done? What has Chrysler done? What has Jack Welch done? So if you can teach people in your entrepreneurship class, that is what will inspire more people to become entrepreneurs. Make it a must do. You have to do what, read about Jack Welch, discuss it in class. The teacher will tell what has happened. Make a small video, or there must be videos available of such leaders. Show that video for half an hour, 40 minutes, and let the people discuss what you learn from this entrepreneur. What are the tenets or the facets of this entrepreneur which made him successful? And in spite of what failings, he was still successful. So those are the type of things which will really, push entrepreneurship as a class. It will inspire people, because entrepreneurship, more than teaching, can be inspired.
Thank you, sir. I think, the practical tip there that we take back away for institution is the objective of inspiration rather than educating, and the use of case studies to do so. And I think it works as well for innovation in terms of the other areas where management tends to teach and bring that into the class. So thanks a lot, sir, for that. I get back to Mr. Sudhakar. This is the last section on gender.
Sudhakar, just before you say that, I'm very happy to read one of the message on my daughter. Thank you very much, Sunita, for that message. My daughter will cherish that message. Thank you.
Yes, I think you must convey this message to your daughter. Definitely, it's such a nice endorsement. Yeah. Very nice. Sir, I have this question on this separate, but one of the last buckets of questions is on gender. What about women entrepreneurship? What is the kind of support that is available now or required for making women entrepreneurs successful? We all the time talk about and look at and see, witness entrepreneurs who are men, generally speaking, but then women entrepreneurs are far and few. So what is the kind of support that's required to make women entrepreneurs also successful? And are there any intrapreneurial skills specific to women that one should teach or imbibe?
So typically, I wouldn't want to make gender specific comments, but there are quite a few schemes for women entrepreneurs, both of the state and the center. The one thing which I've seen women is their emotional intelligence is far higher than men. They understand what is going on in a person's mind much better than men. And believe me, in business, in today's world, emotional intelligence is almost always more important than mathematical intelligence. If you can understand what is happening in a person's mind, whether it is your employee, whether it is your customer, or whether it is your supplier, it's a very big advantage. And I have seen that women entrepreneurs are typically better off at emotional intelligence than men on a general scale, so to say. The only thing which is keeping women entrepreneurship back is that, sort of safety, ease of movement within the country, traveling, which happens a little less. That's the only thing which, if that becomes much more acceptable and more people travel and move around, I don't think there's anything to stop women entrepreneurship. The same goes with the entrepreneurial skills. A woman has much more emotional intelligence to understand what is happening. The problem is the male dominated society like India, the acceptance of a woman boss is a little difficult even today. So need to change that mindset in people's mind. I think that is more than anything else which can be collectively done by everybody else in the world. That working under a female boss, that male dominant society, that mindset has to change. I don't know what's an easy way for that to do, but definitely by far I've seen emotional intelligence higher in women, and I think that's the biggest skill for an entrepreneur to succeed.
Great, sir. So women are scoring high on emotional intelligence, and that's a very important value for success in entrepreneurship. That's a very important note for today. So what I would like to do right now is I will hand over to Professor Prasad with a question to him. The question to Professor Prasad is, we have had roughly 1.5 hours of session today. Lot of learnings, lot of insights, and very good examples and analysis that has been done on carefully drawn questions that we have presented to the guest. Now, what are the things that are designed as part of the online MBA program, ICFA's online MBA program, that you think will equip, or it is taking care of the dreamer in the MBA student? That is the dreamer. As sir said, a poet is required. It's a combination of a poet and a bania. So how are our students, how is this MBA program going to equip our students with the dimension of a dreamer as well as the dimension of a bania? Or what are the other sets of things that are embedded while architecting this online MBA program? Question to you, Professor Prasad.
Thanks, Mr. Sudhakar. That's a very interesting question, and you've given me a framework to respond. And there are many takeaways from today's session. In fact, the entire journey through a learning program, if it becomes, and particularly a business program, if it becomes a journey to launch an innovation or launch an enterprise, and you got the comfort of 2 years and so many colleagues, whether senior, junior, and the exposure to the corporate, if it is turned out into that, I think that is something that we can do better than many others. I think that's something that we should think about, and we have planned our program in that particular fashion. So we've got this practicum at the end of in the 4th semester, which is basically to target all that learning and then try and showcase an innovation if you're an intrapreneur for your organization, and try and showcase a startup. Either if it's too good, you can sell it right away, or if it's, you can get a funder. Try and see what you can do. Start that imagination right from day one. And we have always been saying that imagination is far more important than knowledge. And the knowledge is good, but if you're able to connect that knowledge to imagination and you're able to build around the context that you work in. So for a lot of working executives who do our program, they already have a very rich context. I think that Surana sir has drawn in by talking about those adjacencies in the value chain where you can connect. And a lot of things that we do, it's actually, it's not that it doesn't have the potential, but having seen both sides, I can say that, the conceptual framework of management has come from practice. It has not come from something else. So there is a potential in the classroom to connect it in a variety of ways. And we have tried to do that through the thousands and thousands of micro cases and nano cases, which are essentially small nuggets like 3-minute videos, 5-minute videos, some example of something happening somewhere else. This is just to set a stage for the person to bring in and imagine, and then discussion is needed. So if the classroom triggers that as what can be done outside the classroom, and then you're able to bring it into the classroom, into a discussion forum, whether it's online in a discussion forum chat or somewhere else, I think that sets a kind of, a chef in motion. The person who's doing the program eventually has to become a chef. So chef is where you need both. You need the art as well as you need the business. So you need to have that kind of a mindset. And certainly it is learning to learn. I mean, if you do that, then you may not start that business, but I think your mind gets tuned in such a way that you will know how to come up with startup ideas and connect to it as well as deliver on it. In brief, this is what I would like to pitch in as far as the program design goes.
Great. Now it is 8 p.m. and I would like to, with your permission, conclude this webinar. And I must say that Mr. Devendra Surana has really made this a blockbuster session. It is so engaging. I mean, my interaction with Mr. Surana is not the first time, and it's not going to be the last one. But every time I have interacted, both in person as well as across the screen, new sets of learnings have always emerged for me. And I'm sure it is the same for all the members of the audience who are presently around the screen and also who are watching this live on different modes. Sir, it is a brilliant way how you have crafted the journey of your business, evolving from the first generation to the second generation or third generation. From there on, it has become like tuning it to the realities at that particular time, because you have always floated 4 or 5 new ideas and made sure that at least 1 or 2 emerged out of that, and this has been a continuous exercise. So you have very well crafted and given us several tips on how to manage from first gen business to the second gen business, and actually imbibe a set of values and those counterintuitive tips to become a successful intrapreneur, even if you're working within the organization. Entrepreneurship is more about risk-taking and ownership, whether you work for your own organization or work for some other organization. I think on this grand note, with all your permissions, I would like to conclude this and thank you once again for delivering a wonderful talk and responding to all our questions in a brilliant manner. Thank you very much, sir. And I thank all the members of the audience for joining and also patiently listening to the entire conversation beyond the time that we have set for ourselves. So thank you once again to everyone. Please take care, stay safe, and do double masking if you have to go out. It's anyway lockdown. You may not have to go out, but just in case there is an emergency, please wear double mask. Inside, it has to be N95 kind of mask, and on top of it, a surgical mask. And extremely, extremely important is to take care, and only when it is really, really required, do venture out. So wishing all the best for all of you and your families, we sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.